Welcome to Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.net. I'm your host, Connie Whitman. So for those of you who don't know me personally, I'm passionate, which you can see from my energy, about helping you change your perspective so you can clearly see whatever that successful future is for you by incorporating the little changes that my guests and I share on the show. You're going to be able to create huge impact within all aspects of your life. So I'm glad that you're tuning in with us today. My motivational quote is by Mark Twain, and Mark says, "The fear of death follows from a fear of life. A man who lives fully is prepared to die at any time." So today's topic, I think, is an eye-opener, but in a good way. So bear with me now. What I'd like you to do is just to ask yourself a couple of questions. First one, if I were to die today, how would I feel about my life? Have I left anything undone or unsaid? And are you living a life you've imagined, or are you living the life based on what others expect you to do? So as you reflect on these notions, are you proud of who you are right here and right now? So I know many of you are thinking, really, Connie, this topic is a freaking downer. Would I ever let you down? Of course not. So today's topic, I have to say, is actually quite inspiring and is going to change your life dramatically today, immediately. So today my guest is the awesome Kate Manser, and we're going to discuss her new book, You Might Die Tomorrow, Face Your Fear of Death to Live Your Most Meaningful Life. Now, at 30 years old, Kate, she's older than that now, but at 30 years old, Kate Manser realized an important truth. Remembering that you might die tomorrow is the best inspiration to live today. After experiencing this radical shift in her perspective, Kate quit her job at Google to build You Might Die Tomorrow. It's a movement to inspire people at every age to really live before they die. So, are you ready to start living? Please help me welcome my amazing guest, Kate, to the show. So, Kate, thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me. What a beautiful day to be alive.
You said it. I know everybody's thinking COVID-19, we're quarantined, right? It's all good. It's all good. We're alive. We're still here. And that's a beautiful thing. So before we started, everybody, I said to Kate, I did read the book. My listeners know, Kate, I always read the author's books. I just feel it allows me to ask better follow-up questions that probably the listeners are thinking. So with the book, and I do highly recommend everybody going out, that the title of the book, I'm going to give you one more time. You Might Die Tomorrow, right? Read the book. It was inspiring. It was hysterical. Kate shares some real authentic stories and just writes with fabulous humor. So it was a quick read, by the way. I think I read it in like 3 hours. I mean, I flew through it. So it's not like a real, dense, heavy read, right? So first question, how did you come, number one, to create this movement and the book, really?
Yeah. Well, I had always wanted to write a book, but I never had an idea. And You Might Die Tomorrow, it first started as a book idea. But what happened was at the time that I had the inspiration about the idea of thinking about your death actually being the best reminder for you to live, it was interesting because I had the inspiration and I was like, oh, I have my book idea. But wait, I also need to live like I might die tomorrow after having this realization. And so that was the time that I left my job at Google and went to travel, because at that time, at 30 years old, one of my highest expressions of living like I might die tomorrow was to travel. Of course, our priorities change. What's meaningful in life to us changes. It's a little bit different now. But the inspiration, like to your question, was that 3 of my friends died within the span of 6 months, and that sent me into a year of death anxiety. And then what snapped me out of that death anxiety was a 4th friend of mine, Dan Friedenberg, was climbing Mount Everest. He died in the earthquake that struck in 2015, and that just caused me to realize that life is so sweet and so short, and we have to live today because we never know what might happen tomorrow. And what's in my control is living today, not whether I might die tomorrow.
And it's true. You do. Please share the story. You start the book with a hysterical story with your sister. You were traveling, you were hiking, and you got into a hot spring, but it had a message, right? That danger message, and that was one of the triggers for you to reflect upon, right? To start living before you die. So just share that story because it's really funny.
Yeah, well, and it's perfect for this time of COVID-19, right? Because we're all having these moments of hypochondria where, like, yesterday I woke up with a headache and I'm like, oh my gosh, is this it? Do I have the virus? And so what happened was I was in New Zealand with my sister on that world tour that I did, and we swam in a geothermal pool way up on the top of a mountain, and it was amazing, but next to the pool was a sign that said, warning, you can get amoebic meningitis if you insufflate the water in this pool, and so of course we swim in it. We have a great time. It's amazing, and we had gone on this long hike, and the hot water was just amazing on our tired muscles. But of course, me being a total hypochondriac, 3 days later, I'm like, oh no, I have a headache. You know, my neck might be hurting a little bit, and you start Googling all of the symptoms, and I convinced myself that I had this amoebic meningitis, which has a 99% fatality rate. Like, that part is not a joke. Like, if you get this amoeba, if you insufflate the water, you're dead within 14 days. So I convinced myself that I was going to be dead in 14 days, which sounds horrendous, right? It sounds horrible. But what was so interesting was that it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life, Connie, because when I thought that I had only 14 days left to live, everything that I loved in my life, the value went up. The taste of my coffee in the morning, the fact that I was on a trip with my sister, which was so special and meaningful, the fact that I woke up in the morning was like winning the lottery every day. And so that was another very experiential way through hypochondria that I realized that living as if everything is a limited time offer makes life so much sweeter, and the value of things go up. And so why do I have to think that I have an amoeba to live that way? And that's where living like you might die tomorrow makes today the day.
That's really true. So when you speak with people, what do you, to explain this, right, that you live like you're going to die tomorrow, right? What examples do you give people so that they could, because people need examples, right? To say, oh yeah, I get that. Okay, yeah, I understand that. What are some examples that you give so people could start to reflect and think, holy crap, I really do need to start living like I could possibly die tomorrow, right? I'm kind of stuck. What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, first, I think it takes a little bit of helping people understand, because at first blush, people think that living like you might die tomorrow is like going skydiving and like quitting your job, and all of a sudden people have this defense that comes up and says, I can't quit my job, I have kids, or I can't go skydiving. You know, there's all these no's because it's scary, right? But what I want people to understand is that living like you might die tomorrow, which is essentially living your most meaningful life, is totally subjective to you. You don't have to skydive if you don't want to. You don't have to quit your job, because what living like you might die tomorrow is again, it's making the value of that present moment huge. And like, if you really were going to die tomorrow, you probably wouldn't skydive today. What you would probably do is call someone that you love and make sure that they know that you love them. You would spend the day appreciating nature and really feeling the final moments that you have to be alive. So the first thing that I do is I help people reframe what living like you might die tomorrow is. And another thing that I do is I help people understand. So if you have lost someone in your life, we typically go through a period where we feel, it's the whole hug your mom a little bit tighter, hug your kids a little bit tighter after we lose someone. Well, why does that have to fade? Why can't we feel that urgency to show love and experience life all the time, and without having to endure loss to do that? And so what I want people to understand is living like you might die tomorrow is like that urgency that you feel after you lose someone, just every single day. It's
funny, in your book too, you share, like, you did quit your job, but But what happens is, because I don't want people listening to think, oh, I could do that. I'm just going to quit and I'm going to start traveling, right? You had plans after you had all these experiences and you thought, wait a minute, this is not the life I really want. I'm not really happy, right? I really want to explore more. So you saved money, right? You met somebody on an airplane, and he had just finished, I think, or close to finishing his travel around the world. And he told you how much per day and had to save and all of that. So you sat down and you wrote a budget out, right, to be able to do this for a year. And then Google actually closed the Austin office, and they were giving you a 3-month package. So you were able to speed up your timeline. But you didn't just quit your job and go and say, I'm going to travel and figure it out. You really did come up with a loose plan, but you did come up with some type of plan. I'm glad you said that. I don't want people thinking after listening to us, oh, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to start traveling. I'm going to live life. This quarantine has made me realize, I could die tomorrow. Let me go to Argentina or wherever it is you want to go. So thank you for sharing that. So what does the research show or tell us about humans and how we actually react to our mortality?
Yeah.
Because that's an important one.
Well, I think when we encounter fear, right, we have our fight, flight, or freeze response. And so the fear of death is totally natural, right? Even the Buddha said that, death is one thing that we humans will always fear. And I think that what I learned in my research was that there are a couple of ways that are scientifically proven or psychologically proven to minimize the fear of death. And one of those is by there's two things, actually. The first one is by essentially exposure therapy. So we live in a death-phobic society where we almost never think about death. We almost never talk about death. When someone does die, we quickly push it away as fast as we can. And so we don't get a lot of opportunity to really meditate on our mortality. And so when it happens, there's this element of shock. And then there's fear with that. And then again, that makes us push it away. But what the research shows and what exposure therapy shows is that by gently exposing ourselves to our fear of mortality and by meditating on the idea that dying is completely natural and a completely natural part of being human, we can gently recondition our fear response to, again, we're not going to totally remove that, but we can recondition that fear response so that we're a little bit more open to the idea of our mortality. And so what I encourage you to do, if you are interested in opening up your, reconditioning that fear response and opening your mind and your heart and embracing your mortality, is to just gently open your mind to the idea that death is natural. You can read books on, like my book is a great option. There's plenty of books. There's the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. There's When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. There's documentaries on Netflix that explore mortality. You can even think of when the fish dies for your kids. That's a great opportunity to talk about death and to help your kids understand that death is a part of life, and it also helps ourselves as well. So little ways that you can proverbially, if you're afraid of heights, walk up that building and become a little bit more comfortable with the fear of heights. You can do the same with your fear of death. And the other part of reconditioning that fear response is we're afraid of death because it's scary, it's mysterious, but we're also afraid of not having really lived before we die. And arguably that fear is even greater. And so think about the best way to be happy with the way that you've lived and to more positively approach your mortality is to live your best life. Now, what does that look like, right? We love that Live Your Best Life by Oprah. It's like the rah. But to really understand how to live meaningfully, you have to figure out what's meaningful to you. So when I was 30, what was meaningful to me was traveling, right? I'm 35 now, and what's meaningful to me is a little bit different. And so it's an ongoing process. And I argue that it's sort of this self-fulfilling circular reference, in that to figure out what's meaningful to you in order to live a good life and be less afraid of dying, you can think about death, because death shines a light on what's really important to you. When you have a terminal illness, suddenly you see what's really important to you. And it's usually not the fancy car. It's usually not the big house. And it may not even be traveling around the world. And so I encourage everyone to explore that and live your best life to mitigate your fear of death.
And do it now. It's funny. In one of my classes, I teach sales, right? So one of my classes, I was teaching, I think, how to manage time better and how to keep motivated, manage time and stay motivated to get more done in a day. And one of the exercises I had them do is to write their obituary, to write their, what's it called when someone does the eulogy?
Eulogy.
So, yeah. So I said, write your eulogy. And one of the gentlemen, older gentleman, maybe a little bit older than me, was like, I don't want to do that. That's a horrible exercise. I said, no, it's not. I want you right here, right now. What's really important to you? Yeah, your goals. Yeah, all of those things. But we're getting so caught up in minutia that you're really not focusing on the most important things in your life. So write your eulogy. And would your eulogy say all the things we're talking about, Kate? I'm cracking up. Like, did you live your full life? What did you do for your family what you wanted to do? Did you travel? Did you, whatever that is? Or are you coming on your deathbed, or the eulogy is going to be, he was kind of boring. He really didn't do much. He kind of went to work and came home and sat in front of the TV and drank a beer. And not that that's a bad thing, if that's what you choose, right? So it was just funny, his response, where he gave me such pushback because he probably had these issues that we're talking about with fear. Now, you said living every day in a meaningful way, or living through these meaningful things to you. And in the book, you talk about big versus the everyday. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because there is a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah, so I believe that, meaning is very subjective, right? Like, I think there's some overarching themes that most people share that they find meaningful. So, people, relationships, love, helping others, these are some of the things that I think most people share that bring us meaning. But it is very subjective, right? So I believe that there are big meaningful things and small meaningful things. The big meaningful things are the ones where we typically approach with some hem and haw. We see them as risks. It might be quitting a job. It might be skydiving. It might be deciding to have another child. It might be, dedicating a portion of your life to helping others. It might be starting a business. These are big, meaningful things that should dot the span of everyone's meaningful life, but they'll be different for everyone. But what I learned after I got back from doing my big, meaningful thing, which at the time was, again, quitting my corporate job at Google and traveling around the world, was that we can't constantly be doing big, meaningful things, right? Like, if we're always chasing that next high of the big, exhilarating, quitting the job, having the kid, doing that's not, I don't think, sustainable, right?
Absolutely.
Well, what I found was that exhilaration from doing those big, meaningful things fades. And what we're left with is this day, right? We have the days of our life that we wake up, and on the days that we're not going to be quitting the job or going skydiving, we have to create meaning on those days too. And the way that we do that is through small meaning. Picking up the phone and calling someone we love. Really enjoying the taste of our coffee in the morning. Maybe sitting outside or walking barefoot in the grass. Maybe it's painting. These small ways that we can enhance the quality of our life without taking a big risk. Because if you think about it, those small, meaningful things will make up the biggest portion of our life. And what I want people to track towards is imagining yourself on your deathbed and looking back, and I want you to feel satisfied that you lived a good life. Well, there's two ways that you get to do that. Number one, you have to reflect on what is a good life to you. And number two is you have to actively pursue that every single day. And so, approach those big, meaningful things, those big bucket list items that you've always wanted to do, but don't do those at the expense of finding the simple joys of being alive every single day.
And in the book, you gave one really nice example. You were walking somewhere and something, the way the light hit or whatever, but you talked about the trees and literally like they were alive and vibrating, and you could almost feel the energy as you were walking. And that was one of those, holy crap, this is one of those daily meaningful things that sometimes we walk because we have a destination, let's get there. but we forget to literally smell the roses or look at the trees and what have you. It's funny. We live in a townhouse. We downsized a couple of years ago because, again, my kids are, graduated high school and college, all that. And my neighbor, we love her. She has the deck next to us. So my husband and I, it was just a beautiful sunny day, and I took a glass of wine. I said, let's go sit outside and get a little bit of the vitamin D because we're quarantined. And we're sitting outside, and I'm like, wow, smell how, because we're hitting spring in New Jersey. And I said, oh, smell how good it smells out there. As I got up, I looked over. She had Easter plants, and they're hydrangeas, I think. I might say that, or I might have the wrong plant, but they're very fragrant. So I immediately texted her. She was inside, and I said, by the way, I'm sitting outside with my glass of wine. Thanks for the fragrant, smell wafting over. I said, I closed my eyes, and it was just a wonderful sensation. So I said, thanks for leaving them out on the deck so I could enjoy them too.
Oh my goodness.
Wasn't that a crazy, the reason I'm saying this or sharing this is because your example with the trees, it doesn't have to be grand and huge. It could be the smell of a flower or the green energy that you felt from the tree, the way the sun hit it, whatever. So thank you for deciphering, Kate, that the big from the kind of daily, the little stuff. The little adds up to the big when we think about it, right? That's really
Oh my goodness. Well, let me just say one thing really quick, which is that I want you and everyone listening to understand that we have the power within ourselves to control our own internal pace. Especially right now amid coronavirus, things are moving quickly and there's a lot of unknowns out in the world. Sure. But just like you did on that day with that glass of wine and that hydrangea, you slowed your internal pace and you said, you know what, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to appreciate the hydrangeas, or I'm going to appreciate being alive. And so as things are crazy in our external world, we can take those moments and they're so profound and they're so beautiful, and we can control our own internal pace at any moment. And so when you need that break, you don't have to wait for the external world to slow down. We can create those moments for ourselves.
Yeah. And the wine didn't help, by the way. Yeah, the fragrant smell was good, but that wine tasted awfully yummy to me.
Yeah.
So what, with all this traveling you did, and you met so many fabulous people and saw so many fabulous things, and you share a beautiful story, and I don't, it might have been Tahiti, I don't remember, but you were on the beach and the woman noticed your bracelet and you gave the bracelet and they invited you in and you had this beautiful meal and in this little hut of a hovel, and you talk about how that was one of a very meaningful experience for you, right? What is the best advice with all of the things you spoke about in the book? What was the best advice that you received from someone during your travels? I'm curious, that have stuck with you.
Yeah, well, so man, that's a great question. That happened in Indonesia, actually, and it was this moment where I was walking on the beach and I was on this kind of deserted island in this distant island of Indonesia, and I had met this woman, and we didn't have, the language barrier was 100%, and she invited me into her home, and it was just this dirt shack, and they put a baby in my lap and a cup of hot Indonesian coffee in my hand, and it just made me realize that we have so much and we let our insecurities get to us, because I had this fabulous apartment in Austin and I was like, it's too small. I don't want to invite guests over. I don't really have a good dinner table. But here I was experiencing this amazing hospitality in a dirt shack in Indonesia that I would never forget. And so it just helped me see that no matter what you have, it doesn't matter. What matters is what you share with other people. And the best advice that I got in my travels actually came just this past September. So my trip ended, almost 2 years ago. I think I ended my trip in the end of 2017. So I was traveling for all of 2016, all of 2017. I came back, went back to corporate life for about a year and a half. And then I was traveling a little bit more this past summer, and I went to France. I went to Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery in France. And Thich Nhat Hanh is this very famous spiritual teacher who talks about mindfulness and appreciating being alive in the present moment. So I was like, I got to go to his monastery, because I had just gone through a breakup and I was feeling very empty inside, and like my light had been blown out. And so I was like, okay, a week of meditation, that's what I need. So I went to go live at this monastery with like 200 other nuns, or other nuns, as if I'm a nun. I'm totally not. But 200 nuns, living at this monastery, and I'm basically living life alongside them. And towards the end of the retreat week that I was on, they said, oh, anyone who wants to have a one-on-one with a nun to ask for advice or whatever, we'll make ourselves available. All you have to do is sign up. So of course I sign up because I'm finishing up my book, and I just feel this deep mission inside of myself to be the bearer of the message of living like you might die tomorrow. And I'm like, I need to ask these nuns how I can be a good teacher, right? Like how do I need to get up on the stage and speak, and then what do I say, and how do I teach people? And so I said, I want to have a one-on-one with the nun to ask, how do I be a good steward of this message? And so I sat down with the nun, and she was young, and she had this beautiful, like, luminous face. And I, opened my heart, and I said, I gave her kind of the Reader's Digest condensed version of my story about the deaths that I had experienced and the travel that I had done and the book that I was writing, and how I felt deep in my soul the desire to share this message with people and positively impact people's lives. And I closed with the question, so how can I be the best teacher of this message? And she just looked at me, and she smiled, and she's like beaming, and she said, all you have to do is, she said, your life is the best teacher. And that was just, it was like, oh, I don't have to do anything other than to live my life as the example of living like you might die tomorrow. And because we learn, we learn when people tell us stuff, but we learn 100 times better when we see someone in the trials and tribulations and successes and failures. And so that was the best advice that I had learned. And the reason it was so profound is because that message, that your life is the best teacher, I also heard from Dr. Irvin D. Yalom, is a existential psychologist who has this really just prolific work in helping people overcome their fear of death and just like live more peacefully. And what he has found in his research is the greatest antidote to the fear of death is the idea of rippling. And the idea of rippling is that our actions in life affect far more than we ever know. So our actions ripple out, perhaps throughout generations, and that by being a good person and living a good life, we don't necessarily have to be Mother Teresa. Just by living our truth and living our life and enjoying ourselves and being a good person, we're making the world a better place. And so those two pieces of advice together just help me see that, I can get up on the stage and talk to people all day about living like you might die tomorrow, but the best thing that I can do is to myself enjoy my life and myself have fun and myself be a good person and create that ripple effect of goodness around me.
It's funny that you say that ripple effect. I never thought of that, but it's fascinating. Many years ago, I've been in business, right? Well, I've been in business 20 years, but I've been working for 37 years in sales, always sales. So I've met thousands of people through my career that you talk to. I speak, right, all the things. So I remember I was at a local diner with a friend, and we were just chatting, and a woman walked by. She was sitting behind me, and she stopped as they were leaving, and she said, I don't know if you remember me, but you're Connie Whitman. And I said, yes, I am. And I'm thinking, how do I know her, right? Thousands of people I meet. And she said her name, and I immediately knew who it was, and I knew it was a bank I had worked at, and she was one of the employees. And at the time, I was a regional sales manager, so my job was to help them, for the company, grow sales. So I would go in and I would coach and mentor and create curriculum and all of this other stuff for my team so that we could be number one, right? I wanted everybody to succeed. And she said to the person I was sitting with, she says, I know Connie's your friend. She goes, but I have to tell you, she says, we loved, I hadn't seen her in 20 years. We loved every time she came into our branch. She always said hello to every one of us. She made every one of us feel special. She always took the time to teach us how to just connect with our customers from this place of kindness and love. We love Connie Whitman. And she said, and I recognized your voice. That's how I knew it was you. And as soon as I saw your face, and my hair gives it away, the curly hair. Can I tell you, Kate, I was so touched. I was in tears by the time she finished, but I was like, holy crap, are you kidding me? You don't know the effect you have on people because you don't stop to say, hey, I haven't seen you in 20 years. You know how you affected my life? We don't really get those opportunities, but it is a ripple effect. And I love that visual because you don't know who you're inspiring or helping, or, somebody who's having a bad day, you make them smile. They might not ever see you again. It might be a stranger. There's a ripple effect in life. And now as an older person, I see that. I feel it. I see people coming to me after the fact. I can't believe how you helped me with this. And it's 10, 20, 30 years later that they see me because I'm in New Jersey and I've always worked in New Jersey. It's just very interesting, that ripple effect. Please hear that, guys. You don't have to do grand things. It's just living a beautiful life and being an example. I think you said that so beautifully.
Connie, just really quick, one thing on that note is I want you to feel a sense of meaning in the good that you've done throughout your career, not only helping people, generate more sales and all of that, because I think people are like, I don't have a meaningful job. I just work an office job. I'm in sales. Like, I'm not saving babies. Like, I'm not really helping the world. That is wrong. This story that you just shared is a perfect example that just by going to work every day and being a positive force for the people that you work with, you are making the world a better place. You don't need to be coming up with the vaccine for coronavirus or cancer or whatever, because again, that ripple effect, you're creating meaning in every interaction that you have with the person at the corner store or the person who sits next to you at work. Like, that is creating meaning. You're making people's lives better, or maybe you're not. You're making people's lives worse. And this is a good time for you to look at, am I being a positive influence to the people around me? Guess what? You're still alive. You've got time to turn things around right now and to make things better. That doesn't mean that you can't have bad days. We all do. But to think about the power of your actions are just enormous.
It's true. In one of my classes, and it's just funny that as you're saying this, like, things are popping into my head that you don't realize. In one of the training, this was recent, maybe about 3 years ago. I don't know what I said in the class to this one person. She asked a question. However, I answered it to try to help her at that moment. It was something about her level of confidence, I think. And about a couple of weeks later, she emailed me. She goes, I don't know if you realize how you impacted me. I'm thinking, what? Literally, what did I say? I had no idea, because it was in the moment. It was a passing conversation. It was a passing comment I made. Hey, try this. This might help you out, kind of thing. And it was profound to her because she had never thought about whatever the circumstance was. I just shifted her perspective in that moment. Like, I jarred her into thinking, wait a minute, I didn't even see that side of the coin. Holy smokes. And it really impacted her. So that ripple effect, again, I'll go back to that. It could be a passing comment that inspires someone to do something. And like you said before, the big versus those everyday meaningful things, it's not quitting your job or finding the cure for cancer or whatever it is. It's those everyday, I think, kindness and pieces of love that we share of ourselves. I think that's the crux of really what we're talking about. Be authentic and be real, be humble, be humane, be part of the good of humanity, not the crap that we see in humanity. Last question. We're out of time, but I have to have you answer this. How can everybody listening apply the teachings that you're talking about and manage difficult emotions, especially amidst what's going on with the coronavirus? How can they do it right now? Can you give some advice?
Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot lately about Stoic philosophy, and the basis of Stoic philosophy is focus on their path to happiness. The Stoic philosophers was focus on what you can control and disregard the rest. Mm-hmm. And I feel that is so, so helpful, especially right now, because, I can't control how long we're on lockdown. I can't control whether I or my mom or my neighbor contracts coronavirus. But what I can control is how I approach each day. And again, that doesn't mean that I can't have bad days. But I think right now, as we're managing tough emotions, a lot of those emotions come from the mystery of the future. Absolutely. and how uncomfortable it is to not know all of these different variables. And the future is not in our control. Right? It's true. What is in my control is today. And I find it more helpful than ever to practice grounding exercises. So literally, I put birdseed out on my window so that the birds will come to me. And something about those damn birds coming to the window just makes me feel like, whew, okay, the world is still spinning, like nature is still going, and, just even, obviously I'm a proponent of meditation, but I think it can be overwhelming to think about sitting in, lotus position for 30 minutes right now when I have the attention span of a gnat this lockdown. So even just those breaths where we're like, okay, I'm alive, or look at the tree, or go for a short walk. It's these little crumbs of grounding and normalcy. And so those are my two best pieces of advice right now. Number one, focus on what you can control and disregard the rest. And number two, find those small moments where you feel grateful to be alive and you remember that you're alive today, regardless of what else is going on in the world.
It's true. My story about the smell of the flowers as I was drinking my glass of wine as the sun was hitting my face. It was so peaceful and so wonderful. And it was after a stressful day. I'm working harder than I ever have creating these digital products, which I had been doing anyway. So it's a great opportunity. Now I have the time because I'm not running around training and speaking like I had been last year, like a lunatic. So that the good news is, right, I have this time, but the overwhelm of there's so many priorities now that have to get done. Like everything has to get done at the same time. So stress is still a part of what we're going through, even though some people are working. I have most of my clients are banks, Kate, and with the PPP loan, they're going out of their minds. I mean, they're working till midnight trying to help their clients get the loans processed and everything. So stress is at just a maximum level. So to do what we're asking people to do is really, really hard. But even at the end of the day, I think based on what you said, just reflect for a moment and think, what was the one good thing that happened today that made me smile? Or maybe it was the cup of coffee. Thank God for that cup of coffee this morning. That first sip really kicked me into high gear. It could be a simple little thing, but I think people need to reflect every day and pick one thing that was happy or calming or loving or whatever, right? You know what I'm saying? I think that's part of the grounding that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, your life will pass with blinding speed if you let it.
It does.
And it's up to you to not let it. It's up to you to, again, slow down that pace and take a moment to appreciate the experience of being alive. And if we forget everything else that we said in this interview, I think the number one thing I want people to take away is to enjoy your life, and you'll create those ripple effects of goodness that will go far beyond that which you ever know.
It's true. And I think we forget how to enjoy, which is kind of sad, because at the end of the day, there should be a level of enjoyment, not just drudgery and have-tos and responsibilities. Yes, we all have responsibilities. I'm not saying to abandon them at all, but find a little enjoyments. I do think that matters. Thank you for that. It just a wonderful interview, Kate. Thanks so much. Guys, if you want more Kate, I highly recommend go to her website. I highly recommend the book too. The website is youmightdietomorrow.com. I will post that on the Web Talk Radio platform so you guys can backlink and find it as well. I highly recommend the book. Honest to God, quick read. It was a beautiful quick read. I was laughing out loud as I was reading some of the shenanigans of your stories and how you put little anecdotes like, yes, really, I thought that, it was really, it was real. It was just like you spoke today. I have one last quick question. What was your major in college?
Yeah, so that was one example of me just following my bliss. My major was English literature because I didn't really know what the heck I wanted to do, and I was like, hey, I love reading and writing, and I'm pretty good at it. So it was English literature, and it was great because I got to read all the good stuff. And my birthday is coming up actually on Thursday, and it turns out that Shakespeare and I have the same birthday, and Shakespeare actually was born and died on the same day, April 23rd, and so we'll see what happens with me. But Shakespeare and I, we've got something in common other than a book.
I love it. It's so funny. As you were speaking, and after reading the book, of course, I thought, I'm publishing a book in the next month or so, actually in the next couple of weeks. Yeah. Writing that book, Kate, was painful. I am much better at speaking and interviewing and chatting. I'm good at this. All of a sudden you say, okay, write that down. I go, I don't know what to write, right? So your writing was exemplary from someone who it's very difficult to write. And you speak really, really beautifully and clearly. You articulate well. You don't have tick words because I teach presentation skills. So imagine that. I listen for these things. But your whole demeanor is one of like an English professor's.
Maybe that'll be my future.
I don't know. I just had to ask what your major was. So you're definitely living in alignment with your skill set, your natural born beautiful skill set. So yeah, I just have to ask that. Yeah. Well done. So again, you might die tomorrow.com. Please go buy the book. You might die tomorrow. Read the book. It will give you a whole new inspiring look on your own life. Please connect with me. You could go to my website, whitmanassociates.com. Ton of free resources I'm putting out there now as I've rebranded and redone my website. If you have questions for me, please reach out to me directly at connie@whitmanassociates.com, and I do respond personally. Love to hear from you, love success stories, all those kinds of things. Kate, absolute delight. Thank you for being on. Thank you for writing the book. Thank you for sharing all of your wonderful experiences. Amazing. I wish you so much success with the book and whatever your next endeavor is, because you're in store for more. I feel it.
I love that. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, a real pleasure as well. Thanks. Don't hang up, because I want the recording to finish. Okay. I hope you guys will join me weekly as we question, build, and discover together that this thing we call change, it's easier than you think. And I hope Kate's book, and I hope Kate and my interview today share that change is easier than you think, and sometimes the little steps add up to the big grand life that we're trying to create. Embrace change. Don't repel it. Change is where the magic happens. As soon as you're uncomfortable, magic is starting to happen. So embrace it, okay? Thank you all. Have a wonderful week. You've been listening to me, Connie Whitman, your host on Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.net. As always, thanks so much for joining me. I truly wish you all an inspired week. Go and live like you might die tomorrow. Have a great one, everyone. Thanks, Kate.